Over our festive lunch, my mom demanded I move out and stop relying on family. I quietly packed my belongings, then informed them they'd just forfeited every financial benefit I offered. Her face became utterly void. My own mother's finger, trembling slightly, pierced the festive air of Thanksgiving dinner as she pointed directly at me, her voice a cruel whip lashing through the joyous chatter. "Nick, it's time for you to leave. And frankly, it's time you stop being such a financial burden on this family." The words landed like a physical blow, silencing 20 relatives, each fork suspended midair, each whisper dying on their lips. The sheer, suffocating quiet that followed felt heavier than the weight of the entire universe pressing down on my chest. It had started as any other perfectly normal Thanksgiving, or at least, as normal as it ever gets with my family. I'll admit, I was on my third helping of turkey, feeling a fleeting sense of comfort amidst the chaos, when Mom stood up. Her voice, usually warm, was suddenly colder than the November wind outside, cutting through the holiday chatter like a freshly sharpened knife. My cousin Bradley, the family's supposed golden boy, froze mid-chew, a piece of cranberry sauce clinging precariously to his open lip. Aunt Carol's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips, a perfect crimson droplet threatening to spill onto her pristine white tablecloth. My younger sister, Emma, looked like she wanted the earth to just swallow her whole, right there under the table. And my dad, David, he suddenly found the mashed potatoes on his plate absolutely fascinating, his gaze stubbornly fixed downwards, refusing to meet my eyes. It was a cowardly move, and the sting of it was immediate, a sharp, cold jab right into the core of me. I felt my jaw clench, a knot forming deep in my stomach, but I forced my hand to be steady as I calmly set my fork down, the metallic clink echoing, unnaturally loud, in the dead silence. I looked around at all those shocked faces, all those eyes suddenly on me, judging, condemning, and a strange calm washed over me. "All right, then," I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence. Then I stood up. What they didn't know, what not a single soul in that room had even the faintest clue about, was the crushing, soul-shattering irony of it all. For 3 long, relentless years, I had been the secret pillar holding up their entire comfortable existence, the invisible hand preventing their world from crumbling into dust. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare that was about to unfold. As I walked up the creaky stairs to my old childhood bedroom, the uncomfortable murmur of voices slowly resuming below followed me, each hushed word a new stab. That bedroom, it was the same room where I'd spent countless nights in high school, hunched over a desk, teaching myself computer programming, dreaming of making something of myself. My parents back then had worried constantly about my future, about my unconventional path. Now, pulling my old duffel bag from the closet, a bitter smile touched my lips. They had been so wrong about everything. Here's the thing, 3 years before this nightmare Thanksgiving, my dad lost his job. The Riverside manufacturing plant, where he'd worked his whole life, downsized, letting go of 60% of its workforce. Dad was 52, and suddenly he was competing for jobs that paid half of what he used to make, up against younger, hungrier workers. Within 6 months, the bank notices started coming, 2 of them. Our house, the one I grew up in, the one they cherished, was facing foreclosure. I'd overhear my parents having these hushed, desperate conversations behind closed doors, thinking Emma and I couldn't hear, but we could. I certainly could. And that's right around when my consulting business really started taking off. After college, I'd spent 4 years grinding, building relationships with small community banks across the Midwest. My specialty, custom software solutions that streamline their financial systems while keeping that personal touch these smaller institutions prided themselves on. By the time Dad lost his job, I was pulling in over $200,000 a year. But I lived modestly in a tiny apartment, driving a 7-year-old Honda Civic. I didn't need much. I started small, an anonymous payment to catch up their mortgage. A mysterious check that covered their overdue utility bills. It escalated from there. I even created fake scholarship foundations for Emma's college tuition. We're talking official-looking paperwork, seals, everything, all to make her believe she'd won academic merit awards. I set up shell companies that sent my parents fake dividends and investment returns, all carefully crafted to look like smart financial decisions my dad had supposedly made years earlier. It was an elaborate charade, a sprawling, intricate web of deceit I spun out of love and a desperate need to protect them from the harsh realities of their financial struggles. The truly beautiful, soul-crushing irony of it all was this: while I was working 16-hour days, literally funding their entire comfortable lifestyle, they never stopped criticizing my career choice. My mom would tell neighbors I was just a computer guy who lived paycheck to paycheck. My dad would shake his head, wondering why I didn't get a real job with benefits and security. They had no earthly idea that their stable, comfortable life, their sense of security, was built entirely on my success, my sacrifice. This scenario highlights a classic psychological defense mechanism known as projection, where individuals attribute their own unacceptable or unwanted thoughts, feelings, or traits onto another person. My parents were likely projecting their own anxieties about financial instability and their self-perceived failures onto me, allowing them to maintain a sense of superiority and control in their own minds. They couldn't consciously acknowledge my success because it would shatter the narrative they had constructed. I was folding a t-shirt into my duffel bag when my phone rang. The caller ID flashed, Midwest Community Mortgage Services. Talk about strange timing. But I answered anyway. "Mr. Thompson, this is Janet from the mortgage department," the woman's voice chirped. "I'm calling about the Patterson family account. We show that you've been making payments on their behalf, but we haven't received anything for the past 3 months. The account is severely delinquent, and we need to discuss payment arrangements immediately to avoid foreclosure proceedings." My blood ran cold, a glacial shock spreading through my veins. 3 months behind? That was impossible. I had been sending payments religiously every single month through my automated banking system. I immediately pulled up my phone's banking app, my fingers fumbling slightly, scrolling through my recent transactions. There they were, clear as day, monthly payments of $2,400 to Midwest Community Mortgage, sent electronically on the 15th of every month for the past 90 days. "Ma'am," I said, my voice tight, a strained calm barely holding. "I'm showing payments sent on September 15th, October 15th, and November 15th. Are you certain they haven't been received?" "Sir," she replied, her tone firm, "I'm looking at our system right now. The last payment we received from you was August 14th. After that, nothing. The account shows a current balance of $7,200 past due." Something was very, very wrong. And a chilling realization began to wash over me. As I hung up the phone, a terrible, sickening suspicion solidified. Someone had been intercepting my payments. Someone who knew about my secret arrangement. Someone with access to redirect the money. Someone who wanted my family to fail, all while profiting from my generosity. And I had a terrible, sickening suspicion about who that someone might be. I grabbed my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a frantic energy I hadn't felt in years. For the next 20 minutes, I traced my payment history through my banking software. As someone who specialized in financial systems, I knew exactly where to look for irregularities. What I found made my stomach plummet, a cold, hard stone sinking within me. For the past 6 months, my mortgage payments hadn't reached Midwest Community Mortgage. Instead of going to account number 447,821 under my parents' names, they had been systematically rerouted to account number 448,103 under a different name entirely. A name I recognized immediately: Bradley Patterson. My 28-year-old cousin, the one who worked as a junior loan officer at Riverside Community Bank. Bradley, who was sitting downstairs right now, probably enjoying his second helping of my money-funded turkey dinner. I dug deeper, tapping into banking networks most people could never navigate, my hands shaking slightly with a mix of fury and disbelief. What I discovered wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a carefully orchestrated theft that had been going on for months. Bradley hadn't just stolen my mortgage payments. He had been intercepting various payments I made for the family, redirecting them into his own accounts. The utility payments I sent to keep their lights on? 70% had been skimmed off the top. The car payments for my father's truck? Bradley had been pocketing half, while making just enough minimum payments to keep the vehicle from being repossessed. Even some of the scholarship money I'd been sending for Emma's college had been partially diverted. In total, Bradley had stolen over $70,000 of money intended to support our family. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was seeing how he'd been spending it. 3 separate charges at Paradise Casino totaling $12,000. A luxurious vacation to Las Vegas that cost $8,000. A brand new motorcycle, shiny and expensive, worth $15,000. Premium sports betting accounts with deposits that added up to more than $20,000. Designer clothes, expensive restaurant bills, luxury hotel stays. It painted a picture of a full-blown gambling addiction funded entirely by my family's security. While my parents worried about making ends meet, believing they were surviving on fake government assistance and imaginary investment returns, Bradley was living it up on money meant to keep them housed and fed. And I was still staring numb at the damning evidence on my laptop screen when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Bradley's voice called out cheerfully, "Nick, your mom sent me up to see if you needed help packing. She feels bad about what happened downstairs." He appeared in my doorway, all smiles and fake concern. Bradley had always been the golden child of our extended family. Tall, athletic, with that easy charm that made adults trust him instantly. He played baseball in high school, got decent grades without even trying, and landed his bank job through family connections. Everyone considered him the responsible, successful one. "I brought you a beer," he said, holding out a bottle. "Figured you could use one after that scene downstairs." "Thanks," I said, accepting the bottle but not opening it. The cold glass felt foreign in my hand. "Bradley, can I ask you something?" "Sure, cuz anything." His smile flickered for just a moment, a tiny crack in the facade. "You work at Riverside Community Bank, right?" "In the loan department," I asked, trying to sound casual, as if the question was innocent curiosity. "Yeah, that's right." "What?" "Just curious about how electronic banking transfers work," I said, trying to sound casual. "You know, the technical side of things. I've been having some issues with my business payments lately." He relaxed slightly, buying the act. "Oh yeah, electronic transfers can be tricky. Lots of things can go wrong. Numbers get mistyped. Accounts get mixed up. Happens more than you'd think." "Interesting. So, if someone wanted to redirect a payment, how would they do that?" Now his smile disappeared entirely, the charm melting away like ice in a hot pan. Bradley sat down on my old desk chair and studied my face carefully, his eyes narrowed. "Nick, what exactly are you getting at?" I closed my laptop, the screen going black, a sudden, ominous silence filling the small room, and looked directly at him. "I'm getting at the fact that my family is about to lose their house because someone has been stealing the mortgage payments I've been sending. Someone with access to banking systems and knowledge of account numbers." The color drained from Bradley's face, but he recovered quickly. Too quickly. "Whoa, hold on," he said. "Are you saying you've been paying your parents' mortgage, Nick?" "They've been getting assistance from some kind of government program. They told the whole family about it. Your dad made some smart investments a few years back, and they qualified for housing assistance because of his job loss." "Bradley," I said, my voice flat, empty of emotion. "There is no government program. There are no smart investments. Every dollar keeping this family afloat has come from me. And for the past 6 months, someone has been stealing that money and letting my family slide toward foreclosure, all while funding their gambling addiction." Bradley stood up abruptly, his friendly demeanor evaporating completely, replaced by a defensive snarl. "You're out of line, Nick. You can't just throw accusations around like that. You think I would steal from family? You think I'd let Uncle David lose his house? I don't think it, Bradley. I know it. I have the electronic records, the account numbers, the transaction trails. I know about Paradise Casino, about Las Vegas, about the motorcycle. I know about all of it." For a long, tense moment, we stared at each other in silence. The air in the room grew thick, crackling with unspoken venom. Then Bradley's expression changed into something I had never seen before. Something cold, calculating, and utterly terrifying. "You know what your problem is, Nick?" he said, his voice laced with venom, a low hiss. You think you're so much smarter than everyone else. You think because you work with computers all day, you understand how the real world works. But you don't. You have no idea what's really going on in this family. Enlighten me, I challenged, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a fight-or-flight response kicking in. Your parents don't want your help. They never did. They're embarrassed by you. By your weird job, by the way you live, by the fact that you're 30 years old and still single with no real future. The only reason I stepped in to manage their financial situation was because they asked me to. They wanted someone they could trust, someone who understood their needs. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, the wind knocked out of me. Manage their financial situation? I repeated, my voice hoarse. That's right. Your dad came to me 6 months ago. He was worried about some irregularities in their accounts, money showing up from unknown sources. He was afraid someone was laundering money through their accounts or using them for some kind of fraud. He asked me to investigate and make sure they weren't getting in trouble with the law. Bradley was lying, his eyes cold and unwavering, but he was doing it convincingly, more convincingly than I expected. Your dad specifically asked me to block any suspicious payments and redirect them until we could figure out where they were coming from. We've been building a case to turn over to federal investigators. Congratulations, Nick. You've been under financial investigation for the past 6 months. I realized then that Bradley was far more dangerous than I had given him credit for. He wasn't just a gambling addict who stumbled into theft. He was a skilled manipulator, a master of deception, who had spent months creating an elaborate cover story that painted me as the criminal and himself as the family protector. This twisted narrative, designed to deflect blame and sow doubt, perfectly exemplifies the dark art of gaslighting. Bradley wasn't just lying. He was actively trying to make me question my own reality and sanity, a tactic often employed by individuals with narcissistic tendencies to maintain power and control over their victims. He wanted me to believe that my own efforts to help were actually malevolent acts, turning the truth on its head. Here's what's going to happen, Bradley continued, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper that scraped against my nerves. You're going to keep your mouth shut about your little conspiracy theories. You're going to leave this house like your mother asked, and you're going to stay away from this family's finances. Because if you try to cause trouble, I'll tell everyone that you've been trying to control them with money, that you've been stalking their financial accounts, and that you made threats against me when I tried to protect them. Who do you think they'll believe? Nick, the weird computer guy who lives alone and has no friends, or the responsible bank employee who's been trying to keep them safe? Bradley picked up the beer he had brought me and took a long, defiant drink, his gaze locked on mine, a silent challenge. Besides, I've already told Uncle David that I think I can help them with their mortgage situation. I'm planning to offer them a personal loan later today. A generous family loan that will get them caught up on their payments and keep them in their house. They'll be so grateful they'll probably insist on making me the executive of their will. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking, a cold, bitter laugh bubbling up in my throat. Bradley was planning to loan my family money they desperately needed using the very same money he had stolen from their support payments, then charge them interest on it. Just then, a voice drifted up from downstairs, my mother's, bright and relieved. "Oh, Bradley, that's so generous of you." It made my blood run cold, a chilling echo of his twisted plan. "That's what family is for," he replied, looking directly at me as he said it, a triumphant, sickening glint in his eyes. I excused myself and walked out onto the back porch, the cold November air biting at my exposed skin, but I barely felt it. Through the open window, I could hear my family, their voices muffled but clear, continuing to praise Bradley's generosity and responsibility while dissecting my apparent inability to manage basic adult responsibilities. "I just don't understand where we went wrong with Nick," my mother was saying, her voice thick with self-pity. "Emma turned out so well, but Nick seems lost. He's 30 years old and still can't afford to fix his own car." "Some people are just late bloomers," my father replied, a hint of weariness in his tone. "Maybe this will motivate him to finally get his act together." "I hope so," Emma added. "It's embarrassing when people ask what my brother does for work." I mean, computer consulting sounds impressive, but obviously it doesn't pay well if he can't even afford car repairs. Maybe he should consider going back to school, suggested Aunt Carol. Having a trade or something more stable. Bradley's always said that people in the financial industry do well. My mother chimed in, perhaps Nick should consider following his example. Standing on the porch, my breath misting in the frigid air, listening to my family discuss my failures while wearing clothes and jewelry purchased with money I earned, I finally understood the true nature of the people I had been sacrificing for. They weren't just ungrateful. They were cruel. They were small-minded, selfish people who had built their comfortable lives on my generosity while simultaneously convincing themselves that I was the family disappointment. And they were about to learn exactly what disappointment really felt like. But first, I needed to gather more evidence. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Then, stepping further away from the house, I called my business attorney, Sarah Thompson. Sarah had handled my corporate contracts for 3 years, and I trusted her completely. More importantly, she specialized in financial crime and family law. "Nick, you're calling on Thanksgiving," she said, her voice immediately serious, a true professional cutting to the chase. "This must be serious." "Sarah," I began, my voice tight with a mixture of anger and resolve. "I need legal advice about a complicated situation involving theft, fraud, and family finances. How quickly can you review financial documents and build a case?" "Depends on the complexity, but I can work over the weekend if it's urgent." "What are we looking at?" "Fines, lawsuits, federal charges." I explained the situation in detail, the 3 years of family support, Bradley's systematic theft, the redirected payments, the upcoming foreclosure. Sarah listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on dates and amounts. "Nick, this is a federal crime," she finally said, her voice grave. "Wire fraud, bank fraud, possibly money laundering. We're talking about felony charges that could result in serious prison time." "How much documentation do you have?" "Complete electronic records of every transaction. Banking statements, account numbers, routing information, and evidence of where the stolen money went. I can also prove the family believes they were receiving government assistance and investment returns that don't exist." "Good. What do you want to achieve here?" "Civil prosecution, civil recovery, family reconciliation." I thought about my mother's public humiliation, the hot flush of shame that had spread across my face. My father's lecture about responsibility while wearing clothes I bought him. Emma's embarrassment about my supposed failures, and the family's complete dismissal of my request for $50 in help. I want justice, Sarah. But I also want them to understand what they've lost. Is there a way to stop all financial support immediately while protecting myself from tax consequences? Absolutely. In fact, you should have structured this differently from the beginning. Anonymous gifts to family members without proper documentation create massive tax liabilities for you. We need to immediately establish that you're ceasing all financial support and transfer legal responsibility back to them. My stomach clenched, a new wave of anxiety. How quickly can you make that happen? I can file emergency paperwork tomorrow that terminates your financial obligations and establishes a clear legal separation between your finances and theirs. I can also prepare the criminal complaint against your cousin and file it with federal prosecutors by Monday. Do it. All of it. Nick, I need to ask, are you prepared for the consequences of this? Your family is going to face foreclosure, repossession, and significant financial hardship. Your cousin is going to prison. This will likely destroy your family relationships permanently. I looked through the window at my family, still discussing my character flaws while planning how to spend Bradley's generous loan of money stolen from their own support payments. Sarah, I said, my voice steady, solid as stone. They've already destroyed our relationship. They just don't know it yet. All right, I'll need you to send me every financial document you have tonight. Bank statements, transaction records, payment confirmations, everything. Can you do that? Absolutely. One more thing. Do you want to give them a chance to make this right before we file criminal charges? Sometimes family situations can be resolved without involving law enforcement. I'm going to give them exactly one chance, but they'll need to earn it. What I was planning next would redefine what earning it truly meant. After hanging up with Sarah, I called my accountant, James Rodriguez. James had been managing my business finances since I started the consulting company, and he understood the tax implications of my family support better than anyone. Nick, good to hear from you. How's the holiday? Complicated, James. I need to talk to you about the family financial support situation we discussed last year. The anonymous gifts, what about them? I need to stop them immediately and restructure everything to minimize my tax exposure. Also, it turns out someone has been stealing a portion of the support payments for the past 6 months. There was a long pause on the other end, a palpable shift in his demeanor. Nick, we need to meet first thing Monday morning. The tax implications of this are more serious than I think you realize. My heart hammered against my ribs again. How serious? Because you've been making substantial anonymous gifts to family members without proper documentation or gift tax filings, the IRS could treat them as taxable income for you. We're talking about potentially over $100,000 in unexpected tax liability. Add to that the fact that you've been deducting business expenses while supporting family members, and you could be looking at penalties and interest that would bankrupt you. My stomach dropped, a cold, hollow ache settling deep inside. What I had done out of love could now ruin me financially. This situation perfectly illustrates the unforeseen consequences of informal financial arrangements within families, especially when they involve large sums. While driven by altruism, neglecting formal structures like proper gift tax filings and clear documentation can create significant legal and financial exposure for the giver, transforming acts of generosity into liabilities. What are my options? We need to immediately establish a clear legal separation between your finances and your families. You need to formally notify them that all financial support is ending. And why? We need to document the theft for tax recovery purposes, and we need to restructure your tax filings for the past 3 years to properly account for the gifts. Can you handle all of that? This we can. I'll have to. Nick, if you don't address this immediately, you could lose everything. The tax liability alone could force you into bankruptcy. Then let's fix it. I'll send you the same financial documents I'm sending to my lawyer. Good. And Nick, I'm sorry this happened. Your family has no idea how lucky they've been to have someone like you looking out for them. They're about to find out. After ending the call with James, I sent both professionals complete documentation of my 3 years of family support, transaction records, bank statements, payment confirmations, account numbers, routing information, and detailed spreadsheets showing exactly how much money had gone to each family member for each purpose. The total was staggering. Over $300,000 in mortgage payments, utilities, car payments, insurance premiums, college tuition, and miscellaneous support. Money that allowed my family to live comfortably while believing they were successful and independent. Money that was about to disappear completely. While I was organizing the financial documents, my phone buzzed with a text from Bradley. Hope you're not planning to cause any trouble because would hate for this holiday to get any more unpleasant. I replied, a cold, hard smile playing on my lips. Don't worry, Bradley. I think everyone's about to get exactly what they deserve. His response came back immediately. Glad we understand each other. But Bradley had misunderstood completely. He thought he had intimidated me into silence. He thought his threats and manipulations had convinced me to quietly disappear and let him continue stealing from my family while playing the role of their financial savior. He had no idea that I was about to systematically dismantle the comfortable illusion he had helped create and expose everyone's true character in the process. I spent the next hour documenting the family's behavior on my phone, their discussions of my supposed financial irresponsibility, their refusal to help with my fake car emergency, their praise for Bradley's generosity with stolen money, their complete dismissal of my value to the family. I also researched the legal consequences Bradley was facing. Wire fraud carried a potential sentence of 20 years in federal prison. Bank fraud added another 30 years. The monetary theft exceeded $50,000, which elevated the charges to serious felony level. But more than the legal consequences, I thought about the social consequences my family was about to face. They had spent months bragging to neighbors and friends about their good fortune, their mysterious government assistance and smart investment returns, their successful children, and their own financial wisdom. When the truth came out, they wouldn't just lose their house and cars. They would lose their reputation, their pride, and their position in the community. People they had bragged to would realize they had been living a lie built on their own son's secret generosity. And they would have to face the fact that they had driven away the person who had been keeping them afloat, not through malice or betrayal, but through simple cruelty and ingratitude. As I finished my preparations, I could hear the family inside making plans for Black Friday shopping and discussing their Christmas gift lists. They were making plans funded by money they didn't have, for a lifestyle they hadn't earned, completely unaware that their comfortable world was about to collapse. But I was going to give them one chance to do the right thing. One chance to show they were capable of acknowledgement, gratitude, and basic human decency. If they failed that test, they would learn what it really meant to rely on themselves. I walked back into the house, and the scene that greeted me made my blood boil, a hot, uncontrollable wave of anger. My family had gone upstairs to my bedroom and was actively going through my belongings, apparently deciding what to do with my things now that I was moving out. My mother was sitting on my bed with a box, carefully packing my high school baseball trophies and academic awards. Bradley's children would love these, she was saying to Aunt Carol. They're just gathering dust up here anyway. My father was boxing up my old books, including first edition novels I had collected over the years and technical manuals that had cost me hundreds of dollars. Emma can use these for her college courses, he announced. No point in leaving valuable books unused. Emma herself was going through my dresser drawers, pulling out clothes and accessories. Some of these sweaters would fit me perfectly, she was telling my cousin Jennifer. Nick never really had much fashion sense anyway. But the scene that made me see red, a blinding flash of fury, was Bradley sitting at my old desk, rifling through my laptop bag, and looking at my business documents with obvious curiosity. Bradley, I said, my voice dangerously low, a tremor of controlled rage vibrating through it. What are you doing with my laptop bag? He looked up with that same charming fake smile. Oh, just making sure you didn't leave anything important behind. Your mom asked me to help pack your technical stuff since she doesn't understand computers. I didn't ask you to go through my business documents. Relax, cuz I'm not reading your corporate secrets. Just trying to be helpful. He held up a folder containing client contracts, a smirk playing on his lips. Although, I have to say, for someone who makes a living with computers, you don't seem to have much business coming in. Most of these contracts are pretty small. The rest of the family paused their treasure hunting to listen to Bradley's assessment of my apparent business failures, their eyes alight with self-satisfaction. Actually, I said calmly, deliberately, those are just the local contracts. My major clients are handled through a different file system. Sure they are, Bradley replied with a condescending chuckle, dripping with false pity. Look, Nick, there's no shame in struggling. We all have to start somewhere. Even when you get back on your feet, you can apply for a position at the bank. I might be able to put in a good word for you. How generous. That's what family is for. Of course, you need to work on your attitude first. Banks don't hire people who can't handle stress or criticism professionally. My mother looked up from packing my trophies, her expression stern. Bradley's right, Nick. Your reaction to my comments earlier was really inappropriate. I was just trying to help you understand that you need to take more responsibility for your life. Mom, I interjected, my voice strained, fighting to keep it even. I've been trying to tell you something important about our family's financial situation. Could we talk about that? Honey, I don't think this is the right time for another one of your schemes or excuses. We're all trying to help you pack and get organized. It's not a scheme. It's about your mortgage and the foreclosure notice you received. My father stood up from his box of my books, his face darkening with annoyance. Nick, we appreciate your concern, but Bradley's already offered to help us with that situation. He understands banking and finance better than any of us. We don't need to worry you with adult financial matters. Adult financial matters? My mother added, shaking her head. Son, I know you mean well, but you can barely afford to fix your own car. We can't take financial advice from someone who's struggling to pay his own bills. Emma looked up from my clothes, her tone dismissive. Nick could learn something from watching how real adults handle money problems. Bradley's always been good with financial planning. Very good. Agreed, Aunt Carol added. He saved up for 2 years to buy that motorcycle. That takes real discipline and maturity. I watched my sister praise her own maturity, which had been funded entirely by my fake scholarship programs, while criticizing my lack of perspective. I watched my parents accept Bradley's explanation that I was jealous of their success, which existed only because of my secret support. I watched my extended family nod in agreement about my character flaws while wearing jewelry and clothes purchased with money I had earned. This was the final straw. I realized then that they were beyond redemption. These weren't good people who had been temporarily misled. These were fundamentally selfish, cruel people who felt entitled to judge and dismiss me while benefiting from my generosity. They weren't grateful for their good fortune. They believed they deserved it. They weren't concerned about my struggles. They were eager to use my apparent failures to feel better about themselves. But I was about to give them one last chance to show their true character, to peel back the layers of self-deception and entitlement. You know what? I said, sitting down on my bed next to the box of my childhood trophies, feigning a sudden moment of clarity. You're all right. I have been stressed about my financial situation, and I have been feeling resentful about other people's success. Maybe I should just accept that some people are better at managing money and making smart decisions. The room relaxed slightly, a collective exhale. My apparent surrender to their logic seemed to satisfy everyone. That's a healthy attitude, my mother said approvingly, a smug smile spreading across her face. Admitting you have room for improvement is the first step toward personal growth. Exactly, Bradley agreed, a triumphant glint in his eyes. And Nick, I want you to know that if you ever need financial advice or guidance, I'm here to help. I've learned a lot about money management through my work at the bank. I appreciate that, Bradley. Actually, could you help me understand something? You mentioned that my parents qualified for government assistance programs. How exactly do those work? Well, there are various federal and state programs designed to help families during economic hardship, housing assistance, utility subsidies, things like that. The paperwork can be complicated, but I helped your parents navigate the application process. And the investment returns my father mentioned? Your dad was smart enough to put money into some technology sector investments several years ago. The returns have been providing steady monthly income that's helped supplement the assistance programs. I nodded thoughtfully, playing along, my mind racing. That's amazing. Monthly dividend payments from technology stocks plus government assistance that covers mortgage and utility payments. You must have really helped them optimize their financial situation. I try to look out for family, Bradley said modestly, puffing out his chest, utterly absorbed in his own lies. It's been such a blessing, my mother added, her eyes shining with false gratitude. We went from facing foreclosure to having a comfortable, stable income. Bradley really saved us. And the best part, my father chimed in, swelling with self-importance, is that we don't have to rely on our children for support. We're completely self-sufficient now. Self-sufficient, I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air, tasting its bitter irony. That's wonderful. So, if something happened to disrupt those income sources, you'd be able to manage on your own. Of course, my mother replied confidently. We've learned to live within our means and make smart financial decisions. That's what real adults do, unlike some people, Emma added with a meaningful, dismissive look in my direction. Well, I said, standing up, the adrenaline coursing through my veins now, sharp and invigorating, and walking toward my bedroom door, my heart hammering in my chest like a drum. In that case, I have something important to tell all of you. Something that's going to test exactly how self-sufficient and financially stable you really are. The family looked at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to annoyance, the complacency slowly beginning to crack. Nick, my father warned, his voice stern, an edge of impatience. If this is another one of your emotional outbursts about money, we really don't have time for it. Oh, you're going to want to make time for this one, Dad, because this affects every single person in this room. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, my thumb hovering over the screen. You see, there's something none of you know about your financial situation. Something that's about to change dramatically, starting right now. Bradley's confident expression began to shift into something that looked like genuine concern, a flicker of panic in his eyes. What are you talking about, Nick? I looked around the room at my family, surrounded by my belongings they had been dividing up, wearing clothes and jewelry purchased with my money, planning futures funded by my generosity, completely convinced of their own success and my failure. I'm talking about the fact that you're all about to learn the difference between actual self-sufficiency and the comfortable illusion I've been providing for you. And then I began to tell them the truth. Mom, Dad, Emma, everyone, I said, looking around the room at my entire extended family. Before I leave this house, there's something you all need to understand about your financial situation. Something that's going to change everything, starting immediately. Nick, please, my mother sighed, her voice laced with exasperation. We've already established that Bradley is handling our financial matters professionally. There is no government assistance, I interrupted, my voice carrying clearly through the room, cutting off her words like a razor. There are no investment returns. There are no dividend payments from technology stocks. Every single dollar that has kept this family afloat for the past 3 years has come directly from me. The room went completely silent. My father stopped folding my clothes. Emma's hands froze in the middle of going through my dresser. Aunt Carol slowly sat down the jewelry she had been examining, her eyes wide with shock. That's ridiculous, my mother said after a moment, her voice thin, a forced laugh escaping her lips, a desperate attempt to cling to her narrative. Nick, we've seen the paperwork. We've received official documentation about our assistance programs. I created that paperwork, I replied calmly, my eyes locked on hers, unwavering. I established fake foundations, shell companies, and fraudulent assistance programs to hide the fact that I was supporting all of you. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every car payment, every dollar of Emma's college tuition, all of it came from me. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, projecting the screen onto my laptop so everyone could see the transaction history, the undeniable proof of my hidden generosity. Midwest Community Mortgage, $2,400 monthly for 36 months. Commonwealth Edison, an average of $350 monthly. Riverside Ford Credit for Dad's truck payments, $420 monthly. MS tuition at State University, $18,000 per semester, transferred through fake scholarship foundations I created. The numbers filled the screen in an endless scroll of payments that totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. My father's face had gone completely white, all the color drained from it. Nick, this can't be real, he whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief, the carefully constructed illusion shattering around him. It's completely real, Dad. And it stops today. Right now. I've already filed legal paperwork, terminating all financial support and transferring legal responsibility back to you. But the government programs, my mother whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes, her voice choked with a mix of shame and grief. The assistance applications Bradley helped us file. There were no applications, I said, looking directly at Bradley, whose charming smile had completely disappeared, replaced by a mask of terror, his jaw slack. Bradley never helped you apply for anything. But he did help himself to a significant portion of the money I was sending to support you. That's a lie, Bradley said quickly, leaping to his feet, his voice strained and desperate. Uncle David, don't listen to him. He's having some kind of breakdown. This is exactly the kind of behavior I was worried about. Bradley, I continued, ignoring him completely and keeping my gaze on my parents, unwavering, has been systematically stealing from your support payments for the past 6 months. The mortgage payments you think you've been receiving? 70% went into Bradley's gambling accounts. The utility assistance? Half was redirected to fund his Las Vegas vacations. In total, Bradley has stolen over $70,000 that was meant to keep you housed and fed. I switched screens on my laptop, displaying Bradley's banking activity and gambling records. Paradise Casino, $12,000 in withdrawals. Las Vegas vacation, $8,000. New motorcycle, $15,000. Sports betting accounts, over $20,000 in deposits. All funded with money stolen from your family support payments. Bradley's face had gone from confident to desperate, his eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. You're insane, Nick. You can't just throw around accusations like this. I've been trying to help this family. Have you, Bradley? I shot back, my voice sharp, unforgiving. Is that why you redirected their mortgage payments for 3 months, causing them to face foreclosure? Is that why you plan to offer them a predatory loan using their own stolen support money and then charge them interest on it? My mother stood up shakily, her hand clutching her chest, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Bradley, is this true? Of course, it's not true. Bradley stammered, his eyes darting frantically. Nick is making this up because he's jealous of our success. He's been spying on our financial accounts and creating these fake records to make himself look important. These aren't fake records, I said, pulling out printed bank statements and transaction logs, the paper rustling crisply in the sudden silence. These are official banking documents showing 3 years of systematic support and 6 months of systematic theft. Every payment is documented. Every transaction is traceable. Every dollar is accounted for. I handed the documents to my father, who began reading them with growing horror, his hands trembling visibly, the blood draining from his face. David, I continued, my voice steady but firm, uncompromising. You're going to receive a foreclosure notice next week because Bradley has been stealing your mortgage payments. Your truck is going to be repossessed because he's been pocketing half the car payments. Your utilities are going to be shut off because he's been redirecting the money to fund his gambling addiction. This is insane, Emma said, though her voice lacked conviction, her eyes wide with dawning realization, the tears beginning to stream down her face. Nick, why would you make something like this up? I'm not making it up, Emma. Your full scholarship to State University never existed. I created fake academic foundations and merit award programs to pay your tuition without you knowing the money came from me. You've been attending college on my dime while believing you earned it through academic achievement. Emma sat down hard on my desk chair, staring at the documents I had handed her, her face a mask of disbelief and pain. The Patterson Academic Excellence Foundation doesn't exist. The Midwest Merit Scholarship Program doesn't exist. The Technology Innovation Grant that paid for your laptop and textbooks doesn't exist. I created them all to hide the fact that I was funding your education. But I earned those scholarships, Emma whispered, tears finally streaming down her face, her voice broken. I had the grades. I wrote the essays. You did earn them, Emma. I made sure the fake selection criteria matched your actual achievements. But the money came from me, not from academic institutions that never existed. My father looked up from the bank statements, his face pale and shocked, aged beyond his years. Nick, this shows payments going back 3 years. You've been paying for everything. Everything, Dad. The house, the cars, the utilities, Emma's education, even the Christmas and birthday gifts you thought you were buying with investment returns. All of it came from my consulting business while I lived in a modest apartment and drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. But why? My mother asked, tears starting to form in her eyes, her voice choked with a mix of shame and grief, the facade completely shattered. Why didn't you tell us? Because I knew you'd refuse the help out of pride, and I couldn't stand watching you lose everything. I thought I was protecting your dignity while keeping the family together. I never said anything because I wanted you to maintain your independence and self-respect. I never expected to be publicly humiliated and told to leave because I was supposedly a financial burden on the family. The room fell completely silent, save for the quiet sobs Emma tried to stifle, the weight of my words pressing down on everyone. So when you asked for $50 for car repairs, my father began, his voice hoarse, raw with regret. I was testing you. I wanted to see if the family I had been secretly supporting for 3 years would help me with a small emergency. You refused and lectured me about financial responsibility while wearing clothes and jewelry I paid for. Bradley made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative, his voice trembling. Even if Nick did help with some payments, that doesn't prove I stole anything. He's paranoid and unstable. He's been tracking our family's private financial information without permission. Bradley, I said, turning to face him directly, my voice ice cold, devoid of all warmth. I have security camera footage from Paradise Casino showing you gambling with money that was supposed to pay my family's mortgage. I have hotel receipts from Las Vegas paid for with redirected utility money. I have purchase records for your motorcycle bought with stolen family support funds. I have detailed financial records showing exactly when you gained access to my family's account numbers and began redirecting their payments. I pulled up the final damning piece of evidence on my laptop screen. Most importantly, I have recorded conversations from earlier today where you admitted to intercepting payments, threatened to frame me as financially abusive, and detailed your plan to loan my family their own stolen money at 8% interest. Bradley's face collapsed completely, all defiance draining from him, leaving behind only fear. You recorded our conversation? Every word, including your confession that you manipulated my mother into believing I was jealous and resentful of their success, including your threat to destroy my reputation if I exposed your theft, including your plan to eventually gain control of their house through predatory lending. The room erupted in shocked voices as the family members began to understand the full scope of what had been happening. Bradley stole from us? Aunt Carol asked incredulously, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide. While we were criticizing Nick for not helping the family, Uncle Tom added, his face a picture of dawning fury, a slow burn of anger replacing his earlier judgment. While Nick was actually paying for everything? Jennifer whispered, tears welling up in her eyes, a mixture of horror and realization. Oh my God, I need to sit down, my mother said, lowering herself onto my bed, her face pale, her body trembling. Nick, I called you a financial leech in front of everyone while you were secretly supporting our entire family. You did, Mom. You told me to stop relying on the family while I was actually supporting the family. You refused to help me with $50 while living in a house I was paying for. And Bradley, my father said slowly, his voice laced with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher, a deep, resonant betrayal. You were stealing from us while pretending to help us. Bradley's confident demeanor had completely crumbled. It's not what it looks like. I was going to pay everything back. I just needed some short-term funds to cover some investments that went wrong. Gambling debts, I corrected, my gaze unwavering, refusing to let him twist the narrative one last time. Not investments. Gambling debts that you covered by stealing from your own family security. And you were going to charge us interest on our own stolen money? My mother asked in disbelief, a new wave of hurt washing over her, the depth of his betrayal finally sinking in. I was trying to help. I thought if I could just get back to even, I could repay everything and no one would have to know. By letting us face foreclosure, my father demanded, his voice rising raw with anger. By planning to take ownership of our house? The family's shock was turning to a palpable anger as they realized the full extent of Bradley's betrayal and their own mistreatment of me. Nick, Emma said through her tears, her voice ragged. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. We all thought we believed. You believed what you wanted to believe. Emma, I cut in, my voice softening just slightly, a hint of sorrow in it. That you were successful and independent while your brother was a failure. It was easier to accept that narrative than to question how your comfortable lifestyle was possible. But we didn't know, my mother protested, finally looking at me with genuine distress, her eyes pleading for understanding. How could we have known? You could have questioned how a family facing foreclosure suddenly received perfect financial assistance with no paperwork or requirements. You could have wondered how Dad's supposed technology investments provided exactly enough monthly income to cover your specific bills. You could have been curious about why your good fortune coincided perfectly with my career success. But you didn't want to know, because knowing would have complicated your sense of independence. I closed my laptop, the screen going dark, and looked around the room at my family, a profound sadness settling over me, heavy and cold. So here's what happens next, I said, my voice firm, resolute. All financial support stops immediately. The mortgage. Payments, utility assistance, car payments, and college funding end today. You have 1 week to make arrangements for your actual financial responsibilities before the foreclosure proceedings begin. 1 week. My father asked desperately, his face etched with panic, the stark reality of their situation crashing down on him. Nick, we can't possibly. You're self-sufficient, remember? I reminded him, my voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard echo of their own words. You told me just an hour ago that you were completely independent and didn't need to rely on your children for support. Now you get to prove it. But Nick, my mother pleaded, her voice cracking, reaching out a trembling hand. Surely we can work something out. We're family. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. I looked at the woman who had publicly humiliated me in front of 20 relatives, who had refused to lend me $50 while living in a house I paid for, who had spent the evening criticizing my character while praising my thief cousin. We can discuss the possibility of rebuilding our relationship, Mom, but first, you're all going to experience what it's actually like to be financially responsible for yourselves. You're going to learn the difference between earned success and supported comfort. And you're going to face the consequences of your choices without my protection. I picked up my duffel bag, which now felt impossibly light, as if shedding the burden of their expectations had lifted a physical weight from me, and headed for the door. Nick, wait. Emma called after me, her voice ragged with tears, desperation etched on her face. Where are you going? What are we supposed to do? I turned back to look at my family one last time. They were sitting among the boxes of my belongings they had been dividing up, surrounded by evidence of their own ingratitude and cruelty, finally understanding the true source of their comfort and security. Emma, I said, my voice steady, calm, you're going to do exactly what you've been telling me to do all day. You're going to take responsibility for your own lives, learn to manage money properly, and stop relying on other people to solve your problems. And Bradley, my father asked, his gaze fixed on his nephew, who was staring at the floor in complete defeat, broken. Bradley, I said, my eyes meeting my cousin's, cold and unforgiving, is going to federal prison for wire fraud, bank fraud, and theft of over $70,000. The FBI will be contacting him Monday morning. Nick, please. Bradley said desperately, finally looking up, his voice choked with fear, snot running down his face. I'll pay everything back. I'll make this right. Don't destroy my life over this. Bradley, I replied, my voice calm but firm. You destroyed your own life when you chose to steal from your family and manipulate them into hating their own son. You destroyed your life when you decided to profit from their desperation while letting them face foreclosure. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply removing the protection that allowed you to avoid the consequences of your choices. I walked out of my childhood bedroom for the last time, leaving my family to confront the reality of their situation without me. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I could hear them beginning to argue among themselves, voices raised in accusation, denial, and panic as they realized the magnitude of their crisis. But for the first time in 3 years, their crisis was truly their own, unburdened by my secret generosity, uncolored by my silent sacrifices. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and profoundly lonely moment. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new downtown office, a place that felt a million miles away from that cramped childhood bedroom, when my assistant buzzed me with a call. Nick, there's a Susan Patterson online too. She says she's your mother. I hadn't spoken to my family since Thanksgiving. My lawyer, Sarah, had handled all communications regarding Bradley's prosecution and the family's financial transition, but I had been wondering when this call would come. Hello, Mom, I said, picking up the receiver, my heart a complex mix of apprehension and a strange, deep sense of peace. Nick, honey, thank you for taking my call. I wasn't sure you would. Her voice sounded different. Older, yes, and more tired, but also somehow more genuine, more raw than I remembered. How are things going? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, detached. They've been challenging, but we're managing. Your father found a job at the new logistics center, and I'm working part-time at the community center. Emma transferred to the local community college, and she's working nights to pay her tuition. She paused, and I braced myself, a faint tremor running through me. And the house, she continued, her voice softer, laced with a quiet sadness. We lost it. We're renting a small apartment on the south side. It's not much, but it's ours. We're paying our own bills for the first time in 3 years. I felt a complex mix of emotions, relief that they were surviving, sadness about their losses, and something else I couldn't quite identify, a quiet sense of justice, perhaps. I'm sorry it worked out that way, Mom. Don't be sorry, Nick. We needed to learn how to take care of ourselves. We needed to understand what we had been taking for granted. There was a long pause before she continued, her voice gaining strength, tinged with a new humility. Nick, I called to ask if you would meet with us. Not to ask for money or help, but to apologize. Really apologize. Your father and Emma and I have been going to family counseling, and we've learned some difficult things about ourselves and our behavior. What kind of things? I asked, genuinely curious, a spark of hope igniting within me. We learned that we treated you terribly, not just on Thanksgiving, but for years. We took your success for granted. We dismissed your career. We criticized your choices. And we never once asked if you needed support or encouragement. We were selfish, ungrateful people who felt entitled to judge the person who was keeping us afloat. Her voice broke slightly, and I heard a muffled sob, a sound that, for the first time, felt truly authentic. We learned that when someone loves you enough to sacrifice their own comfort for your well-being, true reciprocity isn't financial, but emotional, a recognition of their efforts and an appreciation for their well-being. We failed you, Nick. We failed you as parents, as siblings, as family. This shift in perspective, moving from a self-serving narrative to one of empathy and accountability, is a profound example of cognitive restructuring in action. Through counseling, the family was able to challenge their ingrained negative thought patterns and maladaptive beliefs about entitlement and responsibility, leading to a healthier and more accurate perception of past events and their role in them. I don't know if I can ever truly forgive you, Mom, I said honestly, the words heavy in the air. But I'm willing to talk. I'm willing to try. Thank you, Nick. That's all I can ask for. The path to reconciliation was long and arduous. It wasn't about erasing the past, but acknowledging it, confronting the pain, and painstakingly rebuilding trust. Bradley went to prison, a harsh but necessary consequence of his choices. My parents and Emma worked incredibly hard to pull themselves out of the financial hole, taking on jobs they wouldn't have considered before, living with a newfound humility. We met, cautiously at first. Then more openly. There were tears, recriminations, and apologies. Slowly, painfully, a new kind of relationship began to form, one built not on obligation or hidden sacrifice, but on stark honesty and mutual respect. It was a relationship I had craved my entire life. 2 years after that Thanksgiving, I stood with Emma at the hospital, both of us waiting outside the delivery room. Emma had given birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl, my niece, Grace. My parents were there too, their faces etched with pride and a quiet happiness. They weren't the people they once were. They were still flawed, still human, but they had learned, truly learned, the value of earned independence and the true cost of unacknowledged generosity. When I finally held Grace in my arms, a tiny, perfect bundle, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. She would never know the burden of my secret sacrifice, nor the sting of my family's ingratitude. She would grow up in a world where truth was valued, and love was expressed not through silent enabling, but through honest, sometimes difficult, boundaries. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's destructive choices. Sometimes, the only way to teach people the value of what they have is to let them lose it. And sometimes, the most painful endings are merely the beginnings of a truer, more authentic life. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to make a tough decision about family, knowing it would change everything forever? What did you choose, and what lessons did you learn from the fallout?